The following session was recorded live in St. Louis, Missouri for the 2001 Annual International Association of Square Dance Callers. This is tape number 8. What do they say?
Hey, this particular session, this is our 3 o'clock or 3:30 session, I should say, and it's called What Do They Say? This is the session on focus groups, and we're hoping that a number of people will pick up this tape also, because this tape will have some information on what the focus groups were. We hope to even include some of the material from our internet studies, and so that information can also be disseminated. We also hope to develop ways to get this information out to the general public, the general dance public, because we think this is information that clubs can use, associations can use, and other national and local and regional groups can also use this information too. Market research, as most of you know, is just at the tip of the iceberg with where we're going with marketing square dancing, and we think this is just an initial step. My name is Mike Seastrom. I'm chairman of the marketing committee. I'm excited that we have a representative here from Starworks, and I realize that it is a little chilly in here. I called down, and hopefully we'll have somebody up fairly soon to adjust the temperature a little bit. So those of you that are shaking a little bit, if you want to get up and jog around a little bit, that's okay too, okay? We could probably even dance a little bit if you wanted to warm up a little, okay? Anyway, as we move along here, if we have any questions, let me know. We've got a microphone. We need to include everything on the microphone so that it gets on the tape of the session, okay? So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our representative from Starworks, Marty Mayo. Marty?
I don't know. I kind of shot my wad this morning. I think you've received or heard the main points. Maybe the best thing to do is say 2 things. I sent Jerry a copy of a handout that you might want to just have, which is an executive summary, and it has 1 page with summarizing the internet research that we did, and then 3 pages the executive summary of the of the focus group research report. And maybe the best thing is just for us to open it up and talk, because I really told you kind of the top line of what the issues were and how we did it. Any questions, anybody?
Maybe we could start out by asking, or maybe answering a question. I'll pose a question. What are focus groups? Why did we choose focus groups for this part of our study?
We were talking in the last session, actually, about how you do research, and we talked about the fact that when you undertake a research project, let me get out my notes, you need to start by doing a lot of planning up front, and the reason laying out what is your purpose for doing the research, and how do you plan on using the results. And the reason why you sit down and do that up front before you do any research or even start to write a questionnaire or anything is because the answer to how you're going to use the information very often determines, or what is your purpose for doing the research, either one of those very often determines what kind of method you use. And we talked about 2 kind of overarching types of research that you do. One is where you start out and you talk to a sample of people, and you've all heard about talking samples. And your goal is to answer a question of how many in this population, or what percentage of this population does X, Y, or Z. And let's say if the large circle over there is a population that you want to know about, and the little dots over all spread through it is your sample, then your what we call a quantitative approach to research answers questions of how many, what percentage. The other approach or kind of research that you tend to get into is when you really don't have a theory about what the reasons might be or what the proportions might be, and you're not really interested in exploring the issue of how many or what percentage, but rather why or how. Then you would take a more, what we call a qualitative approach to doing the research, and we had a perfect example of that this morning. We did the internet study, and we got some answers that some people weren't too sure they believed, and certainly if they did believe them, they didn't understand them, and that was that like 34% of the people had a positive opinion of square dancing. That wasn't the feedback that you were getting. And another 40% had a neutral opinion, so that there's your quantitative answer. You have a population of people who are regular internet users, and we can say that that's kind of the general public. If the opinion of square dancing is that high, or at least relatively positive, why aren't you getting more people in? And to answer that question, you take a more qualitative approach, which is the focus group approach that we did in the second round. And there, you don't know the answers. You know, you can ask, you know what questions you want to ask, but you don't know what they're going to say. So that's why you would do a focus group instead of a survey. Yeah.
Lyle, back with United Square Dancers of America, and coming in the middle here. I'm trying to catch up. This is my third session on the marketing I've been to, but I understand you have done 2 surveys. One, you worked through callers in 3 locations to try and get information on present square dancers, and then you had another survey through the internet. But who did you survey there, or is this that was not dancers, non-dancers?
Well, let me just quickly summarize. That's a good question. Yes, maybe you weren't at the session that we had this morning. Okay. The first question was, well, what is the situation with square dancing, and how are we perceived out there in the general public? And the desire was to find a very cost-effective approach to that. And to do that, you need to use, your question was how many, what proportion. So you want to survey a large group of people, or a large population, not necessarily a large sample. And this internet survey is run by a company called National Family Opinion, and it's in Toledo, and it's a very well-known internet panel. They have many people on the panel who have agreed to answer questions. They balance their panel when they build it to be sure that it is nationally representative geographically, and as far as age distribution goes, and with the sexes and incomes. They balance this panel very carefully to be sure that you can say when you talk to a sample that it represents the total population of internet users. Now, internet users, as we all know, are not the total population of folks that live in the country, but they do represent a pretty broad-based group of people, and it was a pretty cheap way to approach getting some answers about what is the general public's opinion of square dancing, and that's why they chose to do it. When you do this method, you are allowed to ask 3 questions. It was relatively cheap, but then, they supplied a bunch of numbers to me, and I had to put them in my software and analyze them, and that took, and then write it up, and that was a little more part of the cost of the study. But that is a quantitative survey that was done. Now, these were general public, and the advantage of doing an internet panel like this is that the panel has a lot of demographic information about the respondents. In addition, so you ask your 3 questions, but you get all this other information too. So we were able, and I was thinking, well, that's not so bad. Maybe we will find out. We were originally thinking, well, we should talk only to our target population, which is like boomers and young post-boomers or pre-boomers. And I thought, well, maybe this isn't so bad. We'll find out how the young people think. And we'll find out how the very old think. And, in fact, we did. And so it was really good. We found that, just generally 21% of the people have participated in some form of square dancing as an adult. And we were able to look at it by income level and by age level and by marital status and by number of people in the household and so on. So that's why we chose to do this quantitative study. And it generated, and it was done a year ago, almost a year ago to the date from today. And it generated these questions, more questions and answers, actually. It generated some answers, but then everybody had questions. So then the second phase was to see if we couldn't go in and find out a little bit more about, everybody said, okay, so this many people have a positive opinion, why aren't there more dancers? Was basically the thought. And we were forced to say, well, now, wait a minute, an opinion of something isn't necessarily an image of something, and maybe the problem is in the image that people have, not necessarily the opinion. Their opinion might be positive, but it's not necessarily something that they could relate to on an image basis. So that's why we chose to do the focus groups. And that was more, okay, what do you think? And we didn't have answers to that when we went in to start the process.
Jerry Hardy, Stone Ridge, New York. In your experience, what would you think to be the best marketing tool for us or for any group that wants to market their product?
Well, I try to make it very clear that I'm a market researcher, not a marketer. And the job of a market researcher is go out and scope out the land, but and I can tell you where there might be issues that you want to pay attention to, but I can't tell you what to do about them. That's just not my department.
Mike Hogan from Omaha. This may seem a little redundant to those of us in the room, but I know this is going on tape, and there'll be a lot of people that order this tape that aren't in this session. So I'm wondering if, from what I've read of the research, there's basically 2 different things that we found out from it. The opinion of folks who have never square danced before, what their image of square dancing is, and then what's even also, I think, of greater interest to me is those folks who have tried square dancing and didn't continue with it. I wonder if you could just kind of hit the highlights so they're on tape for those people that aren't able to be in this meeting today.
Oh, is that okay with you? What I went through this morning, just to skim through that, that's fine. Okay, we started out, and I stated that, just so that it's clear to everyone, my name is Marty Mayo, and it's not just coincidence that my last name matches Jim Mayo's last name, because he's my brother. And I'm a market researcher, and as I said, I don't have an involvement in square dancing. I don't dance. I used to dance traditional dance. I used to dance to a guy named Ralph Edwards in New England. I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember Ralph Edwards. But when I was a teenager, I danced. And as I explained, I'm a market researcher. I know something about marketing, but that's really not my department. I see my responsibilities to go out and find out about what the lay of the land is and to say, okay, here are things and issues that you might want to pay attention to. But I can't tell you what strategy to use. I can make suggestions, but that's really not my strength. We conducted 2 sets of studies. One was the internet study that we talked about and I described. The other was to answer the questions that arose from that internet study was a set of focus groups, 9 of them, held in 3 cities with large square dancer populations. The focus groups were held in the summer and fall in Charlotte and St. Louis and Portland, Oregon. In each city we conducted 2 groups of non-dancers and one group of ex-dancers. And the ex-dancers were supposed to be people who had started out in a square dance class and then had exited the process before they completed the class series. We found that it was very difficult to find the names, a sufficient set of names of people like this in each of the cities. And in one city, at least, we ended up with a number of ex-dancers who had danced for many years and were very familiar with square dancing, and it was proved to be very useful. But the strict definition was supposed to be people who had just begun in square dancing and then left. That wasn't always what we got. So on the internet study, just quickly, we found that 21% of this total group of people had participated in square dancing as adults, that 34% of them have a positive opinion of square dancing, and 40% have neutral opinions, which is a relatively positive context for square dancing as an activity. A third question that we asked was, if you heard that square dancing was fun, social, and healthy, would you consider joining a square dance class? And in response to that, 16% said they would consider joining a class. Another 40% said they might, or maybe they would consider it. So there was not at all a total rejection of square dancing. We also learned that having had contact with square dance as an adult associates with a more favorable opinion of the activity, that people who are older and people with lower incomes, that is, household incomes at $30,000 or less, tended to be more favorable towards square dancing. Not surprisingly, that women are more favorable than men, and that being younger, unmarried, or living alone tends to reduce the rate at which people have had experience with square dancing. So this was basically that the context for square dancing is relatively positive, that there is potential for expanding interest and participation in square dancing, that people who are baby boomers and over age 55 are viable targets, and that if, and here I step out of my market researcher role and into the more making suggestions to the marketer, that if you're going to market square dancing, you need to leverage your positive female response. Okay, moving on to the focus group research, starting first with the non-dancer groups. We found that the situation is not hopeless as far as square dance goes, but that there are a lot of issues that need to be addressed. We found that the boomer target in particular is very pressed for time. They have not only not very much free time, but they also have many options and choices to occupy that free time with, and that they are more apt to be not wanting long-term commitments with whatever kind of leisure activity they get involved with, and they want flexibility. They want it on a take-it-or-leave-it basis, something that, that we also found that their image of square dancing isn't necessarily in sync with their own self-image, and this is where the disconnect comes. A number of them talked about image of square dancing as something involved with country, with barns, the hayseed-ish. They think of straw hats and, grass in their teeth and hicks and hillbillies. So that's a big theme. Another whole set of images are involved with senior citizens, fluffy dresses, big hair, big belts, and RVs. And they almost said them all in one word, phrase like that. I felt that the more country and barn-like hicks and hillbilly image was associated with your traditional square dancing, and not necessarily with what modern Western square dancing is. They thought in terms of plaid shirts and jeans. They have very little knowledge of modern Western square dancing. We found that there is, among these non-dancers, some potential interest in square dancing, that it's seen as clean and healthy, it's social, and it's good for the family, something family can participate in. They like all of those images. But it has a very low profile in the public. Mind you, we were in 3 cities with very large square dancer populations, and people in Oregon said, well, gee, this is for the country folk. This is if you live in a small town. Urban people, such as those who live in Portland, wouldn't be interested. People in Charlotte were talking about that, they had some dim recollection that there had been a large square dance convention in the city 2 years before, but they basically also thought it was for the hicks and the hillbillies and not for themselves. So the awareness is very low. If they wanted to get involved, they wouldn't know where to go. They wouldn't know what phone number to call. They would not know where it was done. So there was a true lack of knowledge. When we described the square dancing activity and, explored possible interest in getting involved, we found that they think that square dancing makes high demands, and they're not sure they wanted to go along with it. It has a long learning period. Their jaws dropped when we said something like 5 or 6 months. They said, yeah, sure. One guy who was Greek actually said that he always used to go to the Greek parties, and when there's always dancing at Greek parties, and when you're a kid, you just go along behind the main circle or line that's doing the dance, and you do it until you feel you can do it, and then you move in and you just kind of pick it up. And he said, 6 months, forget it. There were problems with the dress code. Many women said, me wear one of those fluffy things? No. And there was problems with heavy-duty commitment, the weekly, bi-weekly commitment. So what is being offered by the square dance community is not in sync with the interests and leisure needs of this particular population, and there's just a disconnect there. Okay, moving on to the ex-dancers. They have strong positive feelings about square dancing. They actually loved it, and they had the kind of positive feelings that I think most marketers would die for, to have that kind of strength of positive emotions about a particular activity. So even though they had left it, they loved it. The club structure was problematic for them, and I would say that many of the problems related to the structure, the way that square dancing is organized. We have the image of square dancing as being your extended family, but many of them found that there were cliques in there, and that the cliques were hard to break into, and so there were problems there. They experienced, when they were feeling insecure about their own skills and capabilities to do the dancing, they found others were impatient with the breakdowns. People, particularly those who were single, found that couples dance with each other, and that they began to feel guilty if they took one partner away from another partner after they were out of the angel process and actually tried to enter into the square dance community. It was really, the fact that there didn't seem to be any way for people to mix, wrong couples, so that seemed to be one of the patterns. There seemed to be some internal fighting, and I don't know if I described that this morning, but in one group in one of the cities, a young man who was 45 described how he and his wife had really wanted to get involved with square dancing. They thought it was something they would enjoy, and they took the class and completed the class and then tried to join the group, and the group had a dress code, but the trouble was that the group had 2 dress codes and 2 factions, and neither faction would give up and join the other faction, and so there was a lot of warfare within the group, and both dress code patterns required that the dress be made, handmade, and there was a pattern for each, but this couple couldn't get the pattern for the dress code because the club couldn't agree on what the dress code was, and they finally said, bag it, I'm just not going to get involved with this, and left. They said they liked it, and they would have liked to continue, but they just couldn't deal with this. They also found that there was high participation expectations in some cities. I guess you're expected not only to go bi-weekly, but you go on raids to other clubs, and you have to go out after the dance and you have your coffee or Coke or whatever it is that you have. And so there were a lot of expectations involved in the actual group participation. They found some uneven transition, and this was where it was useful that we ended up talking with a group of people who had been involved with dancing a lot. There is a difficult transition from the class process into the dance club. And it's both a social difficulty. The groups are already set up, and certain squares like to dance with each other, and you'll go up and you'll stand there, and one person another couple will come, and then three other couples that always dance with that couple, and suddenly you're bumped from the square. And these were social problems that they found difficult to deal with, and felt that that is a time when they're consolidating their skills, and so they're a little timorous anyway. So that this transition from the class period into becoming a regular member of the dance club is a vulnerable period. And that's just where we point out that if you're integrating new people into the club, be aware that this is where you might lose them. They felt that square dancing doesn't offer a lot of choices, that there aren't a lot of levels of complexity, that you start taking the classes and then you're encouraged to go on and take another year of classes because you aren't quite up to the mainstream or the more complex patterns. And some of them really wanted to go in with a very limited set of calls where they could get used to doing it, something that you could do after 2 months or 3 months, and that they would like to go and be able to dance regularly and get really comfortable with the idea that they know how to function in this activity, but at a much simpler level than was being offered to them. They want the ability to be more flexible about participation, not have attendance requirements. And then there were a lot saying, well, it would be nice if there were programs for singles and for college kids and for young families. The general feeling was that square dancing has its program, and if you like it, that's fine, and if you don't, that's too bad. Bye-bye. And there was kind of like the attitude that it all has to be our way or you're not involved. But, as I said, the enthusiasm for square dancing is intense. And these people were sad that they were no longer participating. And you would hear these sorry tales. And another case, maybe this is the point where I start elaborating a little bit more than we could this morning. There was a woman who was 72, and she had been a regular dancer for many years, and her husband died. And she really missed square dancing, and she not only missed her husband, but missed the whole activity. And she finally found a fellow to date, and he cooperated and came to the dances. It was fairly clear that it wasn't his thing, and that he felt very awkward and was having a hard time learning how to do it. But he was doing it because he liked this woman. But there seemed to be this real, sadness. You could see that she really loved the activity, and she loved being involved with her husband, and she could do it. And it just didn't seem to be, she was on her own hook to go out and find this guy and to do it. So, whatever. There was a feeling, I think, that square dancing needs to take a hard look at itself and maybe make some changes. And in one of the cities, the triplets heard this lady, a very savvy lady in marketing, say, we've talked about all these things and we think it's very important, that there do need to be changes in the activity itself, but I'm quoting her, I just wonder if people who are involved in square dancing want to change. And I remember this lady. I have just one last general topic, which is this marketing issue. We had a lot of trouble finding ex-dancers to invite to the focus groups, and that's because the lists weren't available. And, as I said, marketers say it's easier to get them in the door. Once you got them in the door, keep them, for God's sake. Keep the list. Again, in Portland, one guy was saying, well, gee, we took the classes and we went to 1 or 2 group dances, and then it was the end of this year, and so there wasn't any dancing over the summer. And when the fall came, nobody ever told us. They changed the place where they did the dance, and nobody ever told us where it was. And we went back to the place where we expected to see the dance group, and they weren't there. We just never knew how to get in touch with them. So, this is a matter of marketing. Keep your lists and use them. Do maybe some more publicity. Again, in these cities, these people didn't know where to go to find out about square dancing. So that's PR, just plain, put the notice in the newspaper. Sometimes the newspapers will do it free for you. And there's a lot of work involved in maintaining the Square Dance Club, a lot of it. Just plain administrative work, and it seems as though there might be opportunities for collaboration. And these are just ideas that I have, but mind you, I'm not a marketer, so I'm going to get out of that area. My recommendations are, I think that my first one is that CALLERLAB needs to determine if it has the will to change square dancing to meet the new situation that we're facing. And if the answer is no, well, then I have nothing more to say. If the answer is yes, then they need to think about taking a leadership role, because CALLERLAB has a structure. You are a very decentralized activity. And as I say, I'm trying to work with you to help you do marketing research. I keep trying to put my arms around what I think is the population of square dancers or square dance callers, and every time I think I've got it, it slips away from me, and no, that isn't it. There's this other group over here. And I'm saying, well, wait a minute, what is this definition of the population? But I think that in it all, maybe CALLERLAB has the opportunity to take a leadership role, not necessarily to raise the umbrella and say, do it under CALLERLAB's umbrella, but rather because they're organized enough and can maybe reach out to the square dance community and coordinate something that everybody can agree on. Not necessarily CALLERLAB's vision, but really a shared vision among all the square dance constituencies. And then I have a list of some items that you might want to consider in your future program, like a diverse set of offerings. You've got to, I hear people talking about, well, we've got to agree on do this, and I'm thinking, well, maybe there's enough space in this activity for it to exist in 2 or 3 different formats. And you don't all have to do the same thing. And then collaborate citywide and in regions so that you share the labor, because it's a lot of work. And then I'm thinking, well, in baseball, we start out with the Little League, and then we've got the farm clubs, and we have, the teams that play in the city, and there are all different levels at which you can participate in the activity of baseball, including watching. And, where are these levels? Where are your farm clubs? Where are your Little Leagues in square dancing? A lot of people like to do the very high, I think you call it challenge. And that's wonderful. I mean, and there should be an opportunity for that, but you've got to have feeder groups into that to support it. You can't just have it like a mushroom sitting up here with a tiny little stem. You've got to have it more like a pyramid. Maybe you would consider some relaxed dress codes and social norms to help people get integrated into the dancer community. And then marketing fundamentals, PR, visibility, managing your mailing list. So that's a quick run-through with a few more details of the findings from the focus group research. Maybe.
Good afternoon. My name is Chris Pinkham. I'm a staff writer for the American Square Dance magazine. I'm from New Hampshire. And this question could probably go to Marty or it could go to Jim. I'm not sure just yet who would be best to answer this, but going through the survey or the summary of the survey, I see the word class mentioned 9 times. And that's a word that I've been struggling with for several years to eliminate from my vocabulary, and I finally managed to do it. And I'm just wondering, when this survey was presented to people, was this word class used this often? To me, a class has implications. It has implications of commitment. It has implications of the potential to pass or fail a program. So my consideration is, what can we do to get rid of that concept of class? I run 2 home programs. One is a multi-cycle program. The other one is a community dance program in a fitness center where I'm an instructor. And nowhere, no how, no way do we use the word class. And I think this is something that we need to look at striking from our general vocabularies to eliminate that implication of commitment or pass-fail. The other thing we're working on as well at home is eliminating the concept of graduation, so that this whole thing becomes a continuum and just provides a place for people to dance when they want to, rather than that long-term commitment of dancing once a week, going out on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and dancing with the club. What are your feelings about this, and if we were to do another survey of some sort or continue the survey process, why should we be including the concept of class in that type of survey? And let's look at changing the wording of this, and by that we would change the process and help to change the image of the activity itself. The multi-cycle program group that I work for uses new dancers. My community dance program, which is an in-house program that I began, I just use folk dancing, and it's nothing more than that. We have a very diverse program, and it gets away from the traditional concept of Western-style square dancing. It allows me to be more diverse in my home program, and man, it's a lot of fun. And I don't promote class ever. I say nothing about classes. It's new dancers, or it's folk dancing, or something other than class. And class drives me crazy, you know?
Yeah, I just make a comment here. I agree with Chris. It's a relatively new concept. I'd say maybe in the last 5 years. The idea, I think, originally was pointed out by Ed and Pat Dwar of American Square Dance Magazine. I actually wrote an article and had class in it, and they counted the number of times, and they sent it back to me and said, could you figure out a way to eliminate class from this article? And ever since that time, I have. The first night of my new dancer program, I say, welcome to the Valley Traders Tuesday night new dancer dances, you know, and I call them new dancer dances. They're dancers, and we treat them like dancers. But it's taken a long time for me to lose that vocabulary. How many of you hear our square dance programs referred to as levels? I mean, back in the 80s, we tried to eliminate the word levels. We are still trying to eliminate that word from our vocabulary. It's just one of those things that's really tough to lose. But I agree with Chris. It's probably going to take us another 10 years to lose class and student and beginner, because we instead of calling these guys new dancers, because they're new dancers, but if we call them beginners or greenies or whatever else that the terms we've adapted to these people over the years, it's somewhat condescending, and it appears like names are a little bit more of a factor in our society maybe than we give credence to. So yeah, I think that's a neat suggestion.
We're eliminating the concept of levels. You know, we call them phases. We call them new dancer stuff.
Phases, yeah.
And there's very little in the way of lines between the program to program, and I do my best to blur those lines so that that people don't feel like they're being relegated to something that's not quite so wonderful as the next program beyond what they're in at that point. I just have a real huge problem with the concept of class.
Very good.
Because class has other connotations too. It also implies social class as well.
Sure.
So I try to get away from all of that stuff. And again, through just leafing through this, I found the word class mentioned 9 times.
Right.
And I think that's probably 9 times too many. When we
Sure.
do this again, why don't we consider presenting this in a different light and just coming up with a new buzzword? Why not? I mean, the new dancer works well. Social dancing, whatever. You know, just get away from the class business.
Call them a new dancer. Yeah, and it's a good suggestion. Gene, hold on.
We want to make sure that you get on the microphone so it's on the tape. Okay.
Lyle Beck from United Square Dancers of America again. Hearing you report all the problems that we've done, what all we do to keep people from coming back, we sure shoot ourselves in the foot a lot. We certainly do, and we do it at home too. I know we do. In the 12, 14 years we've been active in dancing, we hear our club level, boy, if we only had a video that we could show. Our association, our state level, boy, if we had a video. On the USDA board, boy, if we only had a good video. Well, this morning again I heard, we're going to get a video. It's going to be a good one. Various videos are brought up, and people shoot them down. Well, they aren't professional. They don't have square dance clothes. They aren't this or that. We seem so fragmented. We're all running here and doing this. We're running there and doing the same thing. And, you know, we have many organizations now, but just recently the National Council of Square Dance Organizations. Maybe this is something that we can get them reactivated again and work together, bring everybody together. I know CALLERLAB's trying to do that too, but we need some central organization to get everybody working.
That's a good point, and let me have Jim just talk to that just a little bit, if I can, for a minute, or talk to that about that organization, because it's a proposal that Jim made to the board last night, and that might
give you, it's just a proposal at this point, but it might give some credence to what you're saying about an approach to unify and to get us all working together. Homer?
Okay. Oh, I'm Homer German from Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and I just want to go back to what Chris was saying over here about doing away with the word class. We've done that in Tennessee for quite some time. It's worked very well. We don't refer to people as class. And one of the other things that I want to go to is my wife pushed for years, along with Karen Ripito and Keith, to do away with the word tall. You know, they used to call him a man and
tall. T-A-W, tall.
T-A-W. What does that mean, you know?
Seesaw, you're tall.
Yeah. So, anyway, they finally kept pushing it, and finally the word came out, and now they use partner. And this was great because you call a man a tall, you know, because we got a lot of lady callers now, and he didn't like that at all. So, anyway... It can be changed. It can be changed, and like I think like Chris, all these things are negatives that we need to get off of the board.
Absolutely, and there's things a lot of us have never even thought would maybe have an impact, but I think that's maybe something to think about. Interesting enough about graduation, that's not a new concept to eliminate graduation. For a lot of us, we've seen our dancers graduate and then never see them again. They've graduated, they've finished, they're done. Let's go bowling next week or something. So it's not a new idea at all. Ernie Kinney, who was the former chairman of CALLERLAB in the 90s, has not had graduations in his area for a long, long time, and he really thinks it's the key. Those people just they're right in the club, and we're not done with any. It's not signifying the end of something. It's just there's a continuum there. So, Gene?
Gene Triplett, Charlotte, North Carolina. One way we solved that problem is we started calling our classes dance parties. We don't have a class, we have a dance party every Monday night. But I wanted to ask Marty a question. Since she had done this survey and she's been all the way across the country from the east to the west coast, and you've listened to everybody, and you said earlier this morning and this afternoon that you did not dance and everything, but after doing this survey and everything, would you take or would you attend a dance party to learn the square dance?
I really like to dance. I will do any kind of dancing. But my husband has 2 left feet, and I really like to do things with him. And I guess I'm partly guilty because I'm not patient enough to go through the learning process for him to get him involved with square dancing. So the answer is no.
Terry Hardy, Stone Ridge, New York. Mike, am I allowed to state over the mic any particular brand or a video?
Cool, yeah.
Is that okay? Okay. As Education Committee Chair, I like to review a lot of videos that come through, and one that was recommended by the CDP Journal, the Community Dance Program Journal, was the one put out by Christy Lane Enterprises, and Pat Carnathan, who is also on the video, does all the calling, and it's excellent. It's an excellent teach video. It's well represented. The music is great. The music is very up and young, and the dancers are in traditional modern Western style dancing garb or clothes, but they're all in various colors. They all look just beautiful. It really is a very, very good video to represent modern Western style square dancing. If you want the folk dance spectrum and how we came to be as an American folk dance, I would recommend Hoedown, and I can give you more details on that particular. I have it with me, actually, if you can get a video machine. But that particular video is very good also.
Wasn't Hoedown a documentary that was put together with Coat Crest?
That's right.
And I think it's even being used in schools and in libraries to give some history on square dancing and our dance.
Very good.
Yep.
I'm Chuck Hardy, a relative. One of the things I did with that video was I took it to the Hudson Valley Council meeting, the Christy Lane video, excuse me, and I think we have a real problem with disseminating information. I'm really the only link between what goes on here and those 22 clubs that come in that organization. And they're really crying for information. I took that video there, and they said, gee, that's an excellent idea. We've been waiting for something like that to come out of the square dance community for years. And on the spot, they all voted to buy another one. I had one with me. Buy another one for the clubs to circulate and look at and review, and then maybe take one for themselves. The community of square dancers in the Hudson Valley, I know, they're crying for this kind of information. But if it wasn't for me, there's just no way for it to get from this here media down to them, because they don't necessarily read American Square Dance magazine, all of them. And, you know, we pitch it at the square dances for maybe 2 or 3 minutes, but it's not to the extent that you're presenting it here. And I'll buy the tapes and I'll loan out the tapes. But we really find, I think, got to find a better way of communicating with our dance population as we have it today. All the things you're doing are wonderful, and I think, as I told Mike Jacob this morning, and we admit that, you know, I'm doing it in the Hudson Valley, but there's probably a lot of other dancer communities where the callers may not be going to their meetings and doing it and passing it down. They may not be standing on the mic and telling the dancers at the dancers, taking that 2 or 3 minutes out of the announcement break to do this. There's a tremendous amount of dancers out there that are not getting this information. We got to do a better job.
You're absolutely right. That's one of the biggest problems we found out in this whole marketing program, and that's one of the things that's on our goals and objectives in our marketing program is to create a better method of communicating, because we're not there. We only have one national magazine left, and they're in trouble. We need to get more subscriptions. We need to get all of our dancers subscribing to their local publications. And as a caller, it's really easy to get on your soapbox and say, if you're not getting this magazine, you should be. And it's easy, and get subscription blanks and run them off and copy them and have them on the stage and tell people this dance has a tremendous amount of history, and there's so much more to it. If you run into a website, publish that. The Hardys came up with some great ideas with their caller association. When they couldn't get everybody active, how about let's establish some contact over the internet? And that's one of the things the board was looking at that suggestion last night, because we need to get better communication. Sometimes callers are so busy with their schedules, we're not in town when the local caller association meets, but we'd still like to be involved, so we need to find other ways to communicate, and that's one of the things that we're going to be doing in this marketing project.
I'm Everett Crowley from Charlotte. I have a question for Marty. When you were doing the survey, you mentioned you had a difficult time getting a list of dancers that had just dropped out, or the new dancers that came and did not continue. How did you go about getting that list?
Let's put that to Jim, because Jim had the task of doing that. It was most interesting.
I'm sorry, Jim. How did you go about that?
When the first subject came up in an executive council meeting, the callers said, no problem. There is all kinds of lists of people who started and dropped out. All these clubs have kept these lists, and there's callers out there who had the caller run clubs, and they've sure kept these lists. So we made the assumption, Marty and I did, that would not be a problem, because you have to understand that when you do this professionally, you have to send names, a whole batch of names, to an outside media group, which in fact contacts these people, does what they need to do, so that's no interference on our part. When she walks in that room, when we walk in that room, they've never seen us before. They don't know why they're there, and we've never seen them before. We know all about them because we've got that data on them, but we don't know who they are. So this has to be done by a separate group. So you figure if you want to get, and it has to be somewhat waged. You can't, you don't want to just get, if you only have 6 people, get those 6 people in. You need about 4 or 5 times as many people, or more than that, probably about 10 times as many people. So we thought that was no problem. We wanted to get 10 to 11 people. That would mean we get a list of names of people, but we just didn't have them. One of the things that has always amazed me since I've been in square dancing for the last 4 or 5 years is why one of the most valuable things you have is a list of people that started, that you went to all the effort to get in there, and you have discarded. And that seems to be the case. Now, I think this is a direct result of the fact that for years, you never had to worry about that. You never had to keep lists of people that didn't show up, because there's another batch showing up next month. And there was never a problem. I mean, I understand this. It's time to change that. That's the most valuable thing you have is that list of people. It just was not available. They thought it was available, and I got one list from, what was it, Portland or maybe it was here. I don't know. This Portland. This great big list of people, and all they really were people who had canceled the subscription to the local magazine, to the local view. It was a beautiful big list and everything, but nothing to do with the fact that they were dancers who had dropped out.
Well, the reason I asked Jim, just in the 5 or 6 years that we've been in square dancing, if someone had asked me, and I'm not a caller, I'm just a person that genuinely loves square dancing and the activity and the fellowship and all the people we've had an opportunity to meet. But I could just go down the club roster, or I could go down just in my office.
Yep.
I could have got you a dozen names of people that came to lessons, and I'll say lessons now because that's what they were called when we went through the class, that are not there. Mm-hmm. And going a little bit further with this, did anyone, was a question ever asked, or did a response, maybe let me put it this way, was any responses given that they dropped out because it was boring, it was not exciting? And the reason I say that, you go to our club or you go to any typical club in the country, you have dancers that's been dancing 25 or 30 years or 15 years. They can go to that club, dance 1 or 2 tips, and they got so many friends there, they can socialize for 2 hours and have a great time and go home refreshed from the visiting at the club. They dance some, but you take a new dancer that comes in, that new couple doesn't know these people to socialize with. And if it's not fun, if it's boring, they're not coming back. And the reason I say that, I've heard that over and over, and our caller is one of the best callers in the area. He's a great caller. He and his wife have given their life to square dance. They do a beautiful job. They teach. It's their life. And I'm a product of that. My daughter's my son-in-law, my wife. And we've had a wonderful time. But some way, somehow, it's got to be so it's fun for the dancers.
Yeah, it has to be. The problem was that the reason we were looking for people who started and dropped out was because that's a particular set of problems than people who have been in square dancing for a year and then dropped out. And we were trying to focus on those particular problems in what we were searching for. We didn't get the right population of dancers. We got some interesting data, and as she has said, it was beneficial to us, but it really wasn't what we're going after.
Yeah. If I can make a comment about that, the social aspect of it, I think that's one of the keys to retaining your new dancers. One of the real keys is that you include those new dancers in the club, in the social aspect, all the club parties, all that, the campouts, all the theater nights. They become a member of your club the first night they walk in that dancer program. Their names are mentioned in the newsletters. We sing happy birthday to them. We do the whole thing. We want to recognize these people. If you do that, you got a much better chance of keeping. That's part of that dancer retention again.
Yeah, it's interesting because one of the things that Marty and I picked up on in this, and it really came out, these were non-dancers that we were talking about, and there is an aspect of belonging to a square dance club that has nothing to do with just learning how to dance. It's just as a social experience. And Mike's Club's a perfect example of it. They go camping, they go to the theater about 3 or 4 times a year, they go to RV parks, they do all kinds of things together. And there are people in there that are probably marginal, basic mainstream dancers, and they only dance once or twice a month. But they love the social aspect of these other meetings. They go out to eat together and everything else. So don't overlook that as an attraction, particularly for single women and for people like that. And this is something Marty picked up on when she was doing her moderator work.
Mary Nafi, Mountain View, California. About video, Mountain View and most cities have a community access station they air that is free to the public. They have, I know because that on camera, it's a Mountain View Speaks Out where anybody can come and say anything they want to about anything of which I'm about ready to get myself on. They actually say about square dancing. I've taken classes through the community station, making my efforts to go on TV. And but anyhow, our means and manners to get video publications, video exposure, and the cities have their free community access stations. Look them up. They're in your phone book.
There are
and they give lessons to learn how to use the equipment.
In fact, the San Diego people have very effective use of this. And you don't even have to have the video. Just go down there in person or take a square down, do a demo. This is done all the time. The readership, as we saw, the viewership is not really that large, but it's an exposure that's positive. It's an exposure that you control. And you got to control those exposures. Unlike a lot of things, the old adage of any publicity, good publicity is not true. In that kind of, as we start to turn this image around, there's bad publicity for us. And just recently, next opportunity to get on the Oprah Winfrey Show, because when I checked it out, they really were going to control the way this was done. They planned to kind of make a joke out of it. We'll get on the Oprah Winfrey Show, but we'll do it when we control the way this thing is going to be seen, because that's a critical issue. So, but this is a nice thing, and everyone should see. The problem is, whose responsibility is to do these things? Is it a caller that makes his living as an independent agent? Particularly, he doesn't run a club. Where do we see? Part of the enigma we have now, and part of the questions we're really asking ourselves as we step back is, where do we get the responsibility for people to do this? There is no home office for you guys. I think I said in the last group meeting in the marketing that you were all prudential agents in business for yourself, identically the way you are now. Once or twice, there'd be a bunch of double-breasted suit guys come in, and they'd make a presentation, and they would have done all this research work, a la Marty, and they would have then come up with their ad agency for the beautiful program, and you'd be paying for it, 50 cents or 50 or 25% for the next, and you'd love it. But there is no office for you. So where does the responsibility lie for this activity? And that's the real question we all have to solve. Part of the problem that we have now is that.
Gene Triplett from Charlotte, North Carolina. On Everett there for just a second, and then had another. We had trouble getting the list, and after what we discussed in other sessions today, if they do not want to relinquish these lists. Paul Walker was kind enough to give us his list. We had a bunch from the Sardis group that was turned in. We even went over into the South Carolina border to get these lists, but they don't want to give it to you. So it's hard to turn them in. And we were looking for new dancer list, that kind of thing, as opposed to just dancers that had dropped off. I think the responsibility of this lies back at the dancers themselves, where you have dancer-run club. The problem we have in Charlotte right now is getting people to take these positions, to take the officers' positions. Everybody will say, well, let Joe do it, let Don do it, or let Betty be the secretary. She's done it 10 years. Well, Betty's tired of being secretary 10 years. We have to have people that are willing to take these responsibilities and not just sit back and say, we have to do this and we have to do that. Unless you're willing to stand up and do the jobs, then I don't think, they need to be griping about it when it doesn't get done. So the responsibility goes back to the dancer or the caller in case of a caller-run club.
We're seeing three things happen in those cases. When they step up into the positions of leadership in a club, either the club folds, the club turns the leadership or a caller or a cuer, or the other thing is the club sends over to committee, and they divide their club up into 3 committees, and each committee maybe has one potlucks a year, and they plan a certain number of their club's dance. And that's an idea that was suggested many, many years ago in the American Square Dance, Sets in Order American Square Dance magazine. But that is a critical problem today. People are reticent to take over leadership positions.
Mike Hogan again. This is something that I touched on a little bit in the last months. One of the things that I shared with Mike is that we really need to find marketing ins out there. Today in most clubs, it's very hard even to get to fill a position because we have to do something. We need to find some people that really, well, first of all, we need to educate them about what's happening to our activity. We got to get the lines of communication started. We need to provide those people with some ways to market their activity. If we can find some people out there that love the activity, then if you're already giving them the idea of how to go about marketing it, I believe most people will follow through and follow those procedures. I'll just tell them what to do and how to go about it. Because I can tell you that, we talk about, there's a legacy that has yard signs available. My club members, and I don't know that yard signs are always the way to go, my club members would, if I had a yard sign and say, put this in your yard, I guarantee every single club member would do it. If I said, please come to my house on Saturday for 5 hours, we're going to make yard signs, I would not. So in many cases, it's a matter of we need to be able to provide these people, I believe, with some of the materials and some of the ideas and some of the steps to take. And then if we can just find some people on local levels, whether it's president of a callers association, president, or just somebody in a local dance association that's going to be our kind of our marketing champion in those various communities. If we can get that all right, it'll start to snowball, and I think we'll have some positive results out of it.
Yeah, to develop marketing, well, Mike, you put it, turnkey
marketing programs. Step 1, Step 2, Step 3. Here you go. It's worked in other markets. Go for it. I think people will do that.
Exactly. We need that kind of thing. One of the neatest projects I saw done years ago was a project that was done by a Martin fellow who was involved with the gate out there, and he had a whole program on how to make square dancing, and it was amazing. And it was in a package that you could pick and adapt to your own club, and he sold quite a few of these packets, and it's called the Ivan Hensley plan. I think it's out there.
Let me just say one thing. I looked at this leadership problem, because it is a problem. And if you can anything that's taken place, it's no more fun later in square dancing. You have to understand the last 30 years, there hasn't been, because when you go out to recruit, you don't have a response from this baby boomer group. I think Marty was talking about. And you have to, this isn't anybody's fault, but it does know exactly where the problem lies. Along with the guilt of letting your club and activity start to weather away, is lack of fun in going out and not getting a response. So clubs are not doing today what they did, and not even the same thing, because they got response. People did mind going out and talking to their neighbors. How many people want to do that today? They don't. And so part of what we're up against is the sociological aspects as well as the financial aspects of this thing. Now, if this was a business, I had a group of 4 clubs about a month ago, 2 months ago. These are clubs ranging from 50-year-old, 45-year-old, up to 35-year-old clubs. And they only get enough people together now for this a lesson program. And they were sitting there on a Saturday morning and wanted to come in and try to help, not to take over the clubs or anything, to help out. And I listened to this thing, and and they were complaining. They deciding what's the price of the dance by 50 cents. Which of course drives me crazy. But the way you charge is the image you have of you. You should be charging twice as much. It costs to go to a movie, for God's sakes. And there's no trained entertainer is teaching you to do something really hard. So I said, it's really interesting. Your 4 clubs, if you started out with just 20 couples each, you can ask 35, 40 years ago, somebody's still there, to put in $20,000. I see this as a business. You'd be lucky to get leadership training. By then, somebody in the family would have become an expert in small businesses. And yet, in the last year, you haven't put $20,000 in this business. You're absolutely, you have. You put more than time in terms of money and expenses and foods and travel and all this stuff. But you don't have an investment in this. But that's the other faced with. Not only is it not any fun, I see this as an opportunity. If I didn't plan a way to start something today, I would not do it through these kinds of. I do it through a caller-owned club or caller-run. I'd never do it with a dancer-run club. I do it as a family business, in which they had a responsibility and they had an investment in it. But they did investment. That's what we have to get across to these people. They have investment if they were asked to start off with a business. And the problem is very difficult. It is not any fun. They're guilty. They feel mad about this thing. They're projected out the faults to everybody else after they blink one time. So you have a real problem in this. Leadership is it. At Anaheim, they have an academy concept plan for teaching leadership. How are you going to get the right people to come down and class and take that course? It's well planned. But they would be lucky they had an investment in this business. They wouldn't lose that opportunity. And we have to make them understand. I don't know that it can be done. I mean, it's and leadership is something that has to start. As Mike said, we have to give them enthusiasm, and then they have to see in the package that we can do this, and we have to talk to people who are doing it. They have to know it's real, and they have to then get the help, support, financially, every way, to push them out. It really is a grassroots effort point, but I really understand that problem. It's a major, major problem.
Jerry, New York, this is another idea along the idea of putting signs on the highway. You already have signs on the highway. There are adopt a highway signs all along the highway. And if a club should adopt a highway, they could have their name right under that highway as an entire program. And by every car that goes by for that club. I don't know whether they put any sign on or anything like that, but it's that club sign and it's there all the time.
Yeah, Donald's seen that on the highway. On towns, when you drive into a town, you find the Lions Club and the Kiwanis sign, square dance banner, right? With the rest of the signs, whatever town. But that works too. Yes, ever.
Another thing, maybe we should talk like major corporations are doing on their class. So many corporations have taken the tie and the suit off casual atmosphere at work. Like now, this is the way I go to work. Years ago, I wasn't tired of work every day. This is the way I go. Like the bankers are. This well, not every banker, but some of the bankers are lawyers. And in our club, maybe we should take away the rigid structure. And maybe it's not as rigid as it appears. We go in and we have bylaws. We have to have rules. Maybe we could have guidelines. Do it on one page, not complicated. And I just want to give you a little incident. In our club, a few weeks ago, we were going to have we had a meeting after the dance to change our fifth Friday night from to a regular dance, I guess with announce plus. So we had, in our bylaws, there's something about 10 notice. We had one person in the club that pulled his envelope out because he didn't get notice before that meeting. Now that turned out, if I'd have had a new dancer there, I would have been embarrassed. Say the 10 days. Ask a question when you go into notice. Don't make an issue. That's a minor thing. But when they see bylaws, I think the bylaws go away and have rules. Not rigid rules, guidelines, or something simple. Like
It was interesting you make the comment about draft National Council of Square Dance. That issue, and just let's talk about should we be changing our draft? A major issue, and there was a tremendous discussion amongst organizations and everything else about the dress, and people felt really passionate on both sides. I took a position last year that many questions feels real strongly was the right decision to make. The decision, and of course, at least our comment, our position on this was that let individual clubs and organizations sponsoring groups that are sponsoring a weekend choose how they're going to enforce this code, and we set up about standards and casual and national and what have you, and let's see 10 or 15 years down the line which clubs and groups is costume a factor at all. We'll find out 10 or 15 years down the line with fashion. Leadership is also a big factor in that. Again, we're going to find out natural selection, whether it's a factor.
Back to it that way. I've looked into that for Caltrans. It's 2 miles, 2 years. And I thought, okay, if it's your idea, you follow it, and coordinate it. And for myself, I know clubs, I know a specific club that about everything.
Have looked very favorably on this concept. And so I think someone had asked earlier about how we're going to get this unification. I think it starts there. It starts with a clearinghouse which truly is ecumenical, that truly is not a byproduct of somebody else's organization. And with good representation on this and good management of this, you have the beginning clearinghouse source in which everyone feels comfortable, safe in channeling through. And yet every organization still has their total independence and autonomy. Even organizations like CONTRALAB, which of course doesn't really feel that you're a folk dance anyway, as you know, because you're too structured and too hierarchical. I think given time, a CONTRALAB will see the benefit of this because they can certainly still remain totally independent as CONTRALAB and come on board. And so can, cloggers, line dance people, all of these. And if we don't capture organizations like Roundelab pretty quickly, we won't have them around. And the reason that's important is when I walk into Walmart with an armful of stuff and lay on their desk, and somebody says, "Hey, it's a shame you guys don't ballroom." Well, that's hot right now. And I'd say, "Ballroom? You want ballroom? We got ballroom. We call it round." It's important that we have as big a package as possible. Plus, you're the parent. All of this stuff came out of you, all of this stuff, including, in some people's opinion, ballroom itself as a dance. Basically came out of the folk dance background, and certainly all the stuff that we know now is swing, we know now is line, all of this came out of square dancing, or came out of its parent. So all we're trying to say is that the only way we think that you'll ever get this kind of unanimity of thought and appreciation of the commonality of purpose that we have is through an alliance rather than someone else's group. It's just not going to happen any other way, I think, and I'm really pushing to try to get that. We have presentations now, and we have presentations as quickly as we can to the leadership in these major groups around the country.
We talked about the question was mentioned the anacronym, and Jim, why don't you go ahead and define that a little bit more, okay?
Yeah. Yes, I can read it to you. It's easiest that way. Leaders representing all major dance groups should be invited to sit down and form the arts. as an umbrella organization, the Alliance A, for round R, traditional T, and square S. That's the arts. Will provide advocacy support for all associated dance groups. And traditional in this acronym includes contra, clogging, line, and any other associated, English dance, any other associated dance groups. Because of a lack of consensus is a major issue and a major obstacle for the next phase of this marketing program, formulating this alliance expeditiously is essential. The rationale: an umbrella alliance like the arts can provide the shared platform that allows balanced representation by all groups from the beginning. As an alliance, individual groups will know that their unique approach and format will not be lost, but will receive appropriate recognition, support, and promotion. These groups will know that through representation by the arts, they can participate in the planning, approval, support, and administration of those programs that they support and which most affect their own unique goals and needs. You're not going to get one of these groups if you just put a Phoenix plan together and it doesn't include them. And I don't think, really, that any one single group is going to be able, at this stage, we're about 20 years late, in saving this activity. But I think there's no limit, and I think every group can participate equally in its resurrection. And that's why this is critical. Does that answer your question? It stands for the first letter in each of these words. And everybody wants to support the arts, for goodness sakes. How could you have a better name than that? You see it all the time. Support the arts.
A lot of where we'll be able to take this marketing project will depend upon the funds we can raise. We can do a certain amount of market research, but to develop turnkey packages, to develop billboard signs, to develop videos, to develop that kind of thing is going to take professional people to do that. We are right at the point, and if you come to the marketing committee tomorrow at 10:45 in the Cleveland room, we'll also show you where we are with our vision statement, our mission statement, our goals and objectives. One of the things we want to talk about in that also is what do we do next? Are we at the point where we need to look to hire professional people to take this one step further? Do we need a consultant that can kind of look at what we've got so far and say, this is where you should go next with this? We need professional people to help us, but that takes money. And raising funds for the foundation is going to be, or raising funds to do this, whether it's the foundation or whether it's through the arts or an alliance like that, we're going to all need to be able to work together. One of the things we talked about last year was just add $1 to every state festival, every jamboree, every national convention. Just add $1 to the registration. And let's put that toward marketing square dancing. Almost every place that I've gone and mentioned this, people are that's no problem. $1 to the registration. You start adding it to individual clubs, you might get a little bit of at this point in time, you might get a little bit of a eyebrow raised or so. But I think it's not a real problem with our jamborees and our festivals. And probably over this last year, we'd have an awful lot of money because there's weekends and there's festivals and state conventions and national conventions.
How about $350,000?
Yeah, probably $350,000 is probably a conservative estimate. So this is a plan we need to get off the ground. We need to get that funding going, and also there'll be a foundation fundraising committee meeting that will happen tomorrow too at about 3 o'clock. No, actually that's 1:30. So we could use your input for there too. Okay. Anyway, any other questions, comments? I would like to thank Mike Hogan, the Vice Chairman of the Marketing Committee, for his input and help. Very nice hand for Jim Hensley, the Creative Marketing Services. And a real nice round of applause for Marty Mayo from Starworks. Tremendous work that they did, too. Guys, have a good convention, okay? Thank you.
Mike Seastrom. Thanks, Mike.